She has started. Lovely. Thank you very much. Yes. So I've crossed out my question marks. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first planning committee of the new year. If I haven't seen you previously this year, then Happy New Year. As usual, a few points to make before we turn to the agenda. This is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decisions have been made ahead of the meeting. Members of the committee sit here as representatives of the whole council and not as ward members. And as the Lord Mayor reminds us at council meetings, members do not enjoy parliamentary privilege in our discussions and therefore should be careful on the wording they use. Turning then to the agenda, the first item is the notice of recording and webcast. This meeting will be webcast for live and or subsequent broadcast via the council's meeting YouTube site. The reference wouldn't mean a lot if I read it out to you, so the best course of action is to go to YouTube and look for Birmingham City Council meetings. Members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items, of which I don't expect us to have any today. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's the standard declarations of interest paragraph that applies to all Birmingham City Council meetings. In addition, you may see or hear members excuse themselves from items because they've previously expressed a view on an item. And again, that will be recorded in the minutes. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just for the record, that I previously objected to item 10, 16 Kent Street, so I will leave the room for items to be considered.
We've got both item 10 and 11 as Kent Street, so you'll be out for both. Thank you. Councillor Cornish.
Second, so therefore I need to excuse.
Thank you. That's item 7. Okay. We move on then to apologies, which I have from Councillor Johnson-White and Councillor Idris. I think everybody else is present. So that's the only apologies there can be. On to Chair's announcements. You'll notice that the 2 Kent Street items appear on the agenda in a slightly unusual format. That was an admin glitch that left them off the first version of the agenda. They were in the reports pack, which was circulated to members. So effectively, we'll just roll on from the planning applications to the appeals report and then the application for 16 Kent Street. The only other announcement I have today is the next 3 meetings, and we are coming up to the point where we're going to meet 3 weekly rather than fortnightly. So our next 3 meetings are the 20th of January and the 3rd and 24th of February, and you should find them in your diaries on those dates. Item 5 then, minutes. Can we confirm for signature the minutes of the meeting held on 23rd of December? And thank our officers for getting them to us so promptly, despite the Christmas and New Year break. I will sign those at the end of the meeting then. Which brings us on already to planning applications. We take these by geographical area of the city, and we take each item in terms of an update from officers, followed by any speakers. We have speakers on 2 items today. So I'll just say at this point that we allow 3 minutes in total for objections and 3 minutes in total for support per item. And James will be managing the speaking times for me today. Then we have a response from our area planning managers for points raised by the speakers, and then we open up to members' comments and questions. So we're starting with the northwest area, and item 6 is 11 Thorncliff Road, King's Standing. As I say, we do have speakers on this item, but first of all, I'll ask Pete for updates.
Thank you, Chair, and morning and Happy New Year, everybody. So with the first item, 11 Thorncliff Road, we do have public speaking, which will follow in a moment, and we do have some updates. Firstly, we've received representation from a local resident that highlights that there is a covenant on the property. We've also received further objections, stated that they do not object to the need to house vulnerable young people, but these provisions should be fully detached properties. There will be considerable more comings and goings from the property from social workers, solicitors, and even the police. This is a material change of a family home to a care facility, which is not in keeping with the area. We have also received a copy of what Councillor Dring was planning on saying this morning. As I understand, she's not in attendance, so I'll quickly summarise that for the benefit of the members. So Councillor Dring states that there is only one letter in support, but objecting are both Oscott councillors in Unity, 33 residents from the vicinity of the application, and Oscott Residents Association. This application is a change of use from solely residential to commercial in a semi-detached dwelling. It completely changes the street scene and character of the road, which has no other commercial buildings. It is contrary to planning guidance to change the character of a street scene. Approval would set a dangerous precedent for other permanent commercial activities granted permission to operate from residential properties, and therefore decreasing housing stock. The adverse effect of this application cannot be underestimated on neighbouring properties and emergency services, with increased specialised traffic and parking. It is also a bus route. I note the absence of an adverse impact report. This is an illegal planning application, as a covenant on the property prohibits change of use to commercial. Although not a planning matter, I would hope that the committee will consider that approval is aiding the applicant to apply for a release. It is not more prudent for the applicant to apply for a release first and not compromise the committee in his endeavours. I am asking the committee, cross-party, to refuse this application on planning grounds and not support the recommendation of the officers. It is overdevelopment of a residential property, and the change of use will completely change the appearance and character of the amenity of its location. In addition, we have also received a letter of support which has been submitted by the applicants, and I understand that this has been sent to all members of the planning committee. I can also summarise this. So this letter includes the background to the organisation making the application in front of you today, what is being proposed. It contains information about the children in need of residential care and also the primary reasons for children coming into care. It also identifies that Birmingham Children's Trust and neighbouring local authorities place many children at significant distance due to the non-availability of children homes, and they wish to bring these children back to Birmingham. Also, it adds that there will be an increase in the population of children requiring residential care, and this is predicted in the coming years. Children homes are often mistakenly perceived as being similar to supported accommodation or exempt accommodation, but unlike these settings, children homes are subject to regulation by Ofsted. Children homes are required to complete locality risk assessment and develop a policy to minimise police involvement. Any serious incident in the home, including a police call out, is required to be notified to the regulator. Benefits of the proposal to the community include an uplift to the property, which uses local contractors and supplies, local jobs, and there will be on-site staff security around the clock. Just very briefly, Chair, in response to the point about the covenant, members will be fully aware that this is not a material planning consideration that can be taken into account in the determination of the planning application, and all other points are addressed in the officer report in front of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. James, I'll hand over to you. As we've heard, Councillor Dring is unwell and therefore won't be speaking. So if I can ask you to introduce and time our speakers.
Thank you, Chair. As we know, there's an objector and a supporter. The objector, Councillor Sandu, will speak first. As previously said, Councillor, you've got 3 minutes, 15 seconds before the end. I'll give you the nod so you know you can start writing. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, I speak today on behalf of residents who oppose this application. I'm concerned that the property and the location is not suitable nor viable for such use, and therefore I'm certain it will have a negative impact on the local area. Council policy states that residential care homes are to be located in detached properties. This property is semi-detached and therefore is not suitable as it goes directly against that policy. Furthermore, Oscott and indeed many areas across North Birmingham already have too many houses of multiple occupation, what are known as HMOs, and properties subdivided into flats, exempt accommodation and other types. The loss of another family home will further compromise the character of this area. Council policy again states that where family homes can be retained, they should be, and especially where they are viable. This is a viable family home and should be retained. There are already practical problems such as parking issues on Thorncliff Road. Approving this planning application will further add to the existing parking pressures, and of course this is on a very busy residential road, which is close to one major bus route and is also the pathway for another. There have already been issues in residential care homes across North Birmingham as a result of poor management leading to crime, disorder and antisocial behaviour. And as mentioned by the comments by my fellow councillor, call out to the police, more people coming and going. This will further have a detrimental impact for local residents and the neighbours who will have to put up with this. Therefore, I urge you to reject this application. This is something that councillors and residents are unified in opposing, and I urge you to reject this application. I would have spoken for a bit longer, but those are my comments today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, swiftly on to the supporter is the applicant, Mr. Butt. Mr. Butt, again, you'll get 3 minutes from the moment you start speaking, with 15 seconds to go. I'll intervene and let you know. Okay.
Thank you very much. I don't think I will need 3 minutes because obviously you've read everything out, what we did send in the supporting document. First of all, thank you very much, all of you, to allow me to speak in the favour of this application. Thank you very much for the planning department to recommend approval for this application. Some of the objections I heard, it just breaks my heart to hear the prejudice around children. They are, as corporate parents, it is our responsibility to look after these children. What I keep hearing is they'll bring antisocial behaviour, they'll bring crime in the area. Where do you guys want these kids to go? I think this is the question I want to ask. We are there to do a job. We want to look after these kids. We want to give them the best outcomes, possible outcomes. I am the registered manager of another care home within the 2-mile radius. We don't call the police. I would like you to ask the police how many times we actually call them, how many times the neighbours have complained. None. We've been operational for about 9 months. I've been the registered manager for the past 7 years. Reese, who is sitting right next to me, who is the proposed manager for this home, we already applied to Ofsted to get an application, and planning doesn't even contribute to 5% of the planning for a registration for a children's home. There will be a very tough regulations that we have to follow when we actually do get the registration with Ofsted. They will go through our neighbouring policy, they will go through a local calling the police policy or safeguarding policy or child protection policy. We do all that before we actually do register. And then we're not left to our own devices. We have to then make sure that we actually maintain the conditions of our registration with the Ofsted at all times. I know Ofsted is always in the news, there's a reason why they are very strict, because they want to make sure these children get the best possible outcomes. My only concern is here, these kids are from Birmingham or from the local neighbouring authorities. They are placed at significant distance. Why? Because there isn't enough care homes and there isn't enough beds within Birmingham. So if we want to bring these kids back within Birmingham, we're working very closely with commissioners and just to provide them the best possible outcomes within the local areas. The reason why they run away, the reason why there's a place right now, they are 400 miles away, they're close to the family, they're close to their friends. Why is it that so difficult for us to actually allow these care homes to be operational, especially when there's a chronic shortage of good workforce within the area. We have got a good track record. We want to do this twice. We want to give the best possible outcomes to this people. As I said, I understand some of the concerns in regards to a 70-detached property. We don't see this as a loss of a family dwelling. There is no commercial vehicles somewhere. We've got a small office and we don't have meetings. But in this case, one of the children, the staff member providing the round the clock care to these people. And that's exactly what we're going to do. With no commercial vehicles coming, we are the way we design the rota, we only have one handover that will be 7:30 in the morning, just so you don't have people keep coming in and out. We want to provide a consistent children anyway. So it is about a normal household of 3 people that are living in it with their parents. And this, to me, is more different than any family care home, any family provision or dwelling within the area. And again, you know, with any changes to the way it does, we want to look anything to the domestic property. And we are spending a lot of money to make this, give this property out there. Thank you.
I'll turn back to Pete then to reply to the points raised.
Yes, thank you, Joe, and thank you to our speakers this morning. I think it'd be useful just to recap what the proposal is. So it's proposed change of use from a single dwelling house to a children's care home for up to 3 children, ages between years 7 and 17. The background would be emotional disorders and learning difficulties. Staff would be on site 24/7, so around the clock. And as a general, there would be 3 members of staff during the day and 2 members of staff at night. I think it would be useful to start by looking at the need for care homes and understanding that within the context of planning policy. So both national and local policy in the forms of the MPPF, the Birmingham Development Plan, and the recently adopted Development Management in Birmingham, DPD, all talk about meeting the housing needs of the people of the city, or the people of the community, and this does include vulnerable children. We've heard this morning that children are being placed at a significant distance outside of the city, and the main reason for this is that there is a shortage of children care homes available. That claim is not in dispute, and it is certainly felt that on the back of this application that the need for the care home has been adequately demonstrated. Now, on the issue of the loss of a family house, there is a policy in the Birmingham Development Plan, which you'll be aware of. It's policy TP35, and that talks about the existing housing stock, and it identifies about utilising best use of the existing dwelling stock. And there is a general presumption against the loss of the housing stock to other uses, except where there are good planning justifications or an identified social need for the proposed use. Officers do feel, in light of what we've been talking about this morning, the need of the care home, that there is good planning grounds and an identified social need for a children's care home to justify the loss of the family house on this occasion. It's probably also worth pointing out that Birmingham Children's Trust and Birmingham Children's Trust do support the application, the proposal in this location. Moving on to noise and disturbance. So policy DM12 in the Development Management in Birmingham DPD does talk about specialist accommodation being appropriate in detached dwellings within their own grounds. It does identify that smaller detached properties, semi-detached properties and terrace properties will not be suitable unless it can be demonstrated that there would be no adverse impact on neighbour amenity. Now, what's being proposed is materially different to a dwelling house. We do have the changeover in staff as part of the rotas, and there are differences between what's being proposed and what is there at the moment. But it does share a lot of similar characteristics in terms of comings and goings, children going to school, visitors and alike, though we do recognise that there is a difference, but we do not feel that the difference is significant, that it would actually cause or create harm to neighbour amenity to a point that it would justify recommending refusal. It's also worth noting that regulatory services don't object to this application, and we have attached a condition to ensure that there is internal sound insulation between the physically attached properties. It's probably also worth pointing out that this is a significantly extended semi-detached property. The bedrooms are located upstairs and the communal space is located downstairs. So we certainly don't feel that it would cause harm to neighbour amenity, and we do feel it complies with policy DM12 in that regard. There's also been talk about crime. Crime and the fear of crime is a material consideration. Weight can only, or significant weight can only really be given to this matter if there is clear substantiated evidence to identify the use in this location will create an issue. We're not aware of any such evidence. We're also mindful that the West Midlands Police and the Birmingham Children's Trust do not object to the application. It's also probably worth pointing out that an individual's behaviour, whether in a care setting or whether in a conventional house, is not the control of the local planning authority, and that's an important point to understand as well. And also that because it's a children's care home, it will be regulated by Ofsted. Finally, just on the matter of cumulative impact and character, we have undertaken an assessment within the locality. The normal amount is 100 metres. We haven't identified any similar uses, so this would certainly be so there certainly wouldn't consider there to be a cumulative impact which would have an adverse impact on character. So just to really wrap up, officers do feel that this proposal clearly complies with the relevant policy and as such is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Throw it open to members for questions and comments. Councillor Azim.
Thank you very much. I think that already buildings, there is no occupation out there. And as a matter of local antisocial behavior, other things and disturbance, I think there are very good stock trees are going to be planted there. They are always sticking with them. And at night, there are people are sticking with them as well. So, and I think director has very good experience, 15 years, to run the such houses. And he has got another one here home. And I think there is no any objection from the police at all on all his record. And I think I'm in favor of that, because that is going to be used as a good purpose for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to drill into the need aspect a little bit more, because in Erdington we have a number of care homes, CT children's homes. Quite often we find that the placements are not local, they're placement of the local authorities, because sometimes you can't locate children locally for whatever reason, traumatic circumstances. So they do get placed in other local authority areas. So I just wanted to drill down the need, because it was suggested that we're having to place Birmingham children quite far away, which obviously is very sad if that's the case, but I just wanted to drill down based on previous experience. We go back a few years ago, unfortunately, COVID has meant it's been difficult to exercise an important parenting role, but I just wanted to drill down as how much is there a need in Birmingham for additional children's places.
Probably all I can offer, Councillor Moore, is that the claim has been made that there is a shortage. That hasn't been disputed by Birmingham's Children's Trust. As officers, we haven't seen any evidence to counter that claim in that sense. So sort of undertaking the planning balancing exercise, we do feel that it does comply with policy TP 35 in terms of identifying, good sound planning justification and an identified social need to justify the loss of family housing on this occasion based on what, excuse me, what's been submitted in support of this particular application. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else? Councillor Simon.
I was just going to say, I can't see any planning grounds to refuse this application. I mean, there's obviously a need for this type of care home. And I was quite saddened to hear that, you know, children from Birmingham, especially those with special needs, are potentially being placed fair distance from Birmingham and their support network. So I support this application.
Thank you. Anyone else? Or are you ready to vote? Pete, I think you've answered questions as we've gone along, so I don't think there's a need to respond any further. Okay, you've studied the report and you've heard the debate. So I'm going to take the vote now. Can I see those in favour? Eight. And those against? And those abstaining? So that's 8 in favour, none against and 4 abstentions. So that is approved. Thank you. Move on. Councillor Cornish is leaving us at this point. As we discussed earlier, having declared an interest, and we're looking at the grassed area at Heathcroft Road in Mere Green. Do we have any updates?
We have no updates, thank you, Chair.
Does anyone wish to ask any questions or speak on this one? Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I was slightly surprised when I looked more into what the location of where this communications mast is going, because actually it's clearly a piece of land which does have a high amenity value, and I know from the appeals that have circulated that the council has successfully defended refusals of applications in similar locations. So I was somewhat surprised that we're recommending this for approval. So I just wanted to clarify in what way do we consider the impact on the character of the area and on the amenity space as being acceptable?
See,
Thank you.
does it help to look at the photos at this point?
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting you put them up on screen, but if
no, I mean, yes, certainly. Let me just bring it up on my screen. So,
if you want to scroll to the photo beyond the last page, it's on page 7 of the report.
So yeah, I think yes, yeah, I do believe that's a very good, useful photo. So probably just to quickly recap on the previous refusal, which was by delegated powers. This was for a 20-metre mast, which was nearby, but in a different location. It was identified as being in a sensitive location because it's a predominantly residential area. Where it was located on Little Sutton Lane frontage rather than where it is now, it was felt that because it's 20 metres high, it had a more open aspect and appeared prominent, and it was an incongruous feature. As officers, we're also concerned about the level of information submitted with the application in terms of looking at alternative locations. We felt it was particularly vague and not suitably robust. And there were also concerns about tree implications as well. There's no supporting information on that. What we've got now is we've got a different proposal. It's moved slightly round the corner. It's been reduced by 25% by 5 metres from 20 to 15 metres. We've also they've also submitted a very robust assessment, which includes 20 alternative locations, and they've submitted a tree report as well. So obviously we need to just consider siting and appearance, policy, national and local seeks the balance, encouraging this new technology and the benefits that come with it, with the environmental impact. We look to keep installations to a minimum, look to share existing mass, look to utilise buildings, look to utilise existing structures, and ultimately where there is a requirement for a new installation, which is the case here, it is suitably placed and is suitably designed and camouflage sympathetically designed. I think probably the thing here is by moving it around the corner, by reducing it to 15 metres, it just nestles in better with the backdrop of the trees. You can see in the photo in front of you, they're deciduous trees, so they lose their leaves, but there's still a good backdrop to those trees. The mast would have good backdrop to those trees. It would be at a very similar height to those existing trees where the previous scheme was poking up above. We also feel that it's appropriate to attach a condition for a colour treatment. We feel like a dark brown or something like that would be suitable in this location. The cabinets could be a green colour to better reflect the grass and the open nature at the ground at the base of the mast as well. But ultimately we do feel that they have overcome the previous concerns. And we are obviously mindful that they have identified or provided a robust assessment that there are no suitable alternative locations. And obviously we need to take into account the social and economic benefits as well. So again, talking about the balance exercise, and we feel that with this amended scheme that we have actually got a scheme which is policy compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do you want to come in?
Members might recall that obviously we now get updated with appeal decisions, and at the latter part of last year we lost a number of appeal decisions. I hear what you said, Councillor Moore, but we lost several on the balance at the end of last year, and a lot of those appeals had a common thread through, which is evident in this application, such as shielded to a certain extent, separation distance. Where the limited harm perceived is not very high. So I think looking at those appeal decisions that we've had, there's a number of common threads coming through that are relevant, the decision related to this application.
Councillor Straker-Wells.
Chair, I'm now about to review my agreements. I don't have a problem with location citing the cushioning about the trees. And you hinted about the colour, so I won't get involved in that. But it occurred to me, I was question, it's a reduction in height from presumably 25 metres to 15. But there's still quite a few 25 metre models around. Will that 15, this is where my ignorance really kicks in, will that reduction still offer the same service and the same potential as a taller model? And why?
That's a very good question. Certainly when we approached the operators on these schemes and we raised concern about the overall height, in many occasions they very quickly reduce them. And it does beg the question, I don't know the answer, basically. I think they wouldn't be putting it forward if it wouldn't work. I think is the simple way to put this across. 20 metres seems to be the standard which we see, which was put in front of us. It almost as if it kind of gives them a little bit of flexibility. In many cases, 20 metres absolutely fine. But in this case, we clearly felt that 20 metres wasn't acceptable in that location. Here, they've come back, they've reduced it to 15 metres. I can only assume that they're satisfied that they've done the necessary test, that it will work. And I think it's an example of the prior approval process working, that we robustly assessed the previous application. We weren't happy with it. It gave them, they didn't appeal it. They've actually looked at it again, and they've actually come forward with a far superior proposal. And so I think it's an example of where it has worked, where the process has worked. Thank you.
It might be something we want to take away as a question for the providers in general, rather than on an application by application basis, of whether within an urban setting, why would 20 metres be needed rather than 15?
If I may actually, sorry, Chair, if I may add, I do know that when they look at sites, they do send out sort of testing equipment. So it may be the case that 20 metres is ideal, but 15 metres works. So they initially apply for 20 metres because it's ideal. It's an ideal scenario. But there may be circumstances where 15 metres won't work, and in those cases they wouldn't be able to propose a 15 metres because it would achieve nothing.
But if we pick it up as a general question, it's clear that they're happy that 15 metres will work in this location. So, are you ready to vote on this one? Can I see those in favour? I make that 9. Those against? 2, which doesn't leave any room for abstentions. So that is approved with 9 in favour and 2 against. That was the end of the North West. Thanks, Kate. While Louise is coming to the table for the South area, and Councillor Cornish is already coming back into the room. We're going to look at 1581 Pershaw Road, Bourneville, on the Sturchley and Cotteridge border, and known to those of you who know the south of the city and the Pershaw Road well as the former Magnet site. We don't have speakers on this one. Do we have updates, Louise?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one update. We've had a response from the Canal and River Trust. They confirm that no objection to the application, subject to a series of conditions. We had already included those conditions within the recommendation. It was around construction management, boundary treatment and landscaping, and that's all covered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members? Not seeing anyone. Okay, you've studied the report, you've heard the update. Are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour? That's 12 in favour, which is unanimous, so that is approved. And that was all from the South area. We're with the city centre for the rest of today's applications. Item 9 is the former Henry's Restaurant at 27 St Paul's Square and Cox Street in the Jewellery Quarter. We do have speakers on this item, so I will hand over to James in a moment. But first of all, when you're settled in, Nick, have we got any updates?
No, there are no updates on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. James, over to you with the speakers.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair's mentioned, we've got 2 objectors that are sharing the 3 minutes. Waylon, as soon as you start talking, I'll start the clock, and obviously between yourselves, you've agreed when you'll hand over. With 15 seconds to go, I'll give you the nod so you can wrap up. Okay, so over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to have the residents before the final decision. The impact on the townhouses in your report is considered acceptable on the assumption that these are double aspect. This is incorrect, and we dispute this point. The townhouses are single aspect. Due to the pre-existing hotel kitchen and open-air event carriers at the back. This fact should not be overlooked or misrepresented in the report. We have an email from the planning officer, Ms. Sheldrake, confirming the single aspect design layout. Since the front, which is the courtyard side, is the only habitable side of our townhouses, the guidelines state that it should receive the same level of protection as the rear of a conventional house, by having regulation more strictly applied. On the contrary, a new building lies as far as what the regulation advice seems to be in obvious disregard of the same. Also, the reference to other jewelry court buildings facing narrow streets does not relate to the unique layout of our townhouses. Again, our courtyard parking is the only site all our habitable rooms face on the field. A 4-story building will be imposing on all our rooms it will be overbearing and have such a severe impact on light, noise, privacy, and that will make us claustrophobic in our own home. Hence our repeated objection. We also dispute that the 5-story building recently approved to be used as a height reference, since the residents' concerns about it were dismissed. It is very unfair to use that to justify the height of new developments. May we suggest, as a condition to approval, to limit the development control height to 3 stories, which is one lower than the developer's ambition, but still one higher than the guideline states. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Very quickly, just to bring to your attention the report, I think, that was made available in the last couple of days. There's 77 signatures of objection on a petition, countless objections. We don't seem to think that there was one single change been made by the developer against all the objections that we've made. The actual statement from Leslie says, although the considerable number of objections from the residents are noted, it's not considered that the development should have any unacceptable impact. We did ask for various meetings with the planning officer to come and see what we are, where we live, and we are owner occupiers. Those were never taken up. We've emailed on numerous occasions to various people. So we do live in there. It's going to affect us massively. We bought that property for some considerable expense. With a heritage wall dating back to 1858, what is the need to take down the arches? We don't see any value. That's what gives us security. That's what gives us protection as well from there. So thank you.
Now we have Speaker Mr. Jowett in support of the application.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Objections are, of course, a material consideration in your determination of a planning application, but only insofar as they relate to policy. Now, this is a brownfield site in a highly sustainable location where your policies confirm that residential development of up to 4 stories, as proposed, is acceptable. Government guidance says that when considering applications for housing, authorities should take a flexible approach when applying policies or guidance relating to daylight and sunlight, where they would otherwise inhibit making efficient use of the site, so long as this results in acceptable living standards, and I suggest this does. Your document, Places for Living, encourages quality and higher densities, active frontage and schemes, which reflects local context, as this does. And separation distances are more generous on this scheme than in many other locations in the Jewellery Quarter, and achieve an appropriate balance between safeguarding privacy for residents and a form of development reflecting the character of the conservation area. The rear arches are to be infilled with decorative metal work, providing further screening. What we have is a front-to-front relationship at both the front of the building and at the rear, not a front to back. There should be no undue noise from commercial units proposed, with conditions controlling the hours of operation and noise. There are no objections to the proposal from your statutory consultees, in particular in respect of noise and parking. Now, the character of the Jewellery Quarter is, of course, that of a tight urban grain, with few buildings having external amenity space. The design of the building has been subject to detailed discussion with officers and adopts an industrial aesthetic appropriate to the location. I suggest the proposal will have a positive impact in terms of heritage. The building reinstates the historic building lines, Cox Street. Officers agree that the Henry's building is a modern pastiche with little heritage interest apart from the rear elevation, which is a surviving element of the original rolling along the side. The proposal returns this feature to its original form and allows increased appreciation of this feature. Officers consider that the development would not be harmful to the significance of the conservation area or the setting of any identified listed buildings. It would also not harm important views into and out of the conservation area. In terms of height, the site steps between Church Court at 3 stories and the new 5-story development appropriate on the corner. The mix and size of units is appropriate, and the addition of 2 commercial units at ground floor is a positive step in accordance with policy. So officers support the application and consider the development of infill this underutilised site and a significant part of the Jewellery Quarter. It will enhance the conservation area, won't cause a problem to residents, and hope you'll support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond to the points raised?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the majority of the points raised, and thank you to the speakers. I think the majority of the points raised are covered in the planning report in some depth, but I'd just like to pick a couple of things out. In terms of overlapping and separation distances, firstly, the single aspect nature of the townhouses is understood, and that is the scenario that we are setting out to members here. And you know, we are considering this as a habitable room to habitable room situation, and that is as it's set out in the report. I think I'd like to refer members to figure 8 in particular, which is on page 13, which I think illustrates the scenario best. That is a scaled cross-section through the townhouses on the right, the proposal on the left. You have the existing building ghosted in green, along with the wall that's to be retained. And then the distance is annotated above. So the distance between the new building and the townhouses is 14.8. You have the distance between the front of this building across the street to the residential across the other way at 11.4. So I think that's really important to draw your attention to. And obviously each scheme needs to be considered on its merits. There's been reference to the consent next door for 5 stories. That is obviously an extant consent and is material, but this obviously needs to be considered on its own merits. In terms of potentially reducing the height to 3 stories, I think, again, you can look at that cross-section and you can see that whilst it would reduce the number of apartments facing these townhouses, you would still have the same situation at the 3rd floor. They would still be able to see above the retained wall. In terms of places for living, as our speaker in support has mentioned, and it's set out in the report, it's always the intention, and it says in the guidance that they are to be applied flexibly, and it's the overall objective behind the standards of what's important rather than the standards themselves. And it must be context appropriate. We're in, obviously, the site's in the Jewellery Quarter here, where a fine-grained development is a character. There are plenty of precedents where a reduced interface distance is evident. And obviously, there is that scenario across the street on Cox Street, immediately adjacent to the scheme at the moment, with the adjacent development that is there. So I think we need to understand that there are heritage benefits to having back of pavement development. There is heritage benefits associated with this, and no harm has been identified by the Conservation Officer as part of this proposal. And like I said, the benefits of having something that's more in character with the Jewellery Quarter that reflects the history of the site and contains the street better are all weighing in favour of the scheme. And then the final point that was that isn't in the report is there was reference made to the value of property. Now, of course, that is not a material consideration to take into account when reaching a decision on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Anyone wish to speak on this one? I'm not seeing anyone. You've studied the report, you've heard the updates, and you've heard the speakers and Nick's response. Are you ready to vote? Not seeing anyone wishing to speak. And I therefore see those in favour. Okay. Those against? Any abstentions? So I've got 10 in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention, so that is approved. Thank you. We're sticking with the city centre, and as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, we're looking at 16 Kent Street. I'll leave it to Nick to explain the complexities, and Councillor Moore has left as he said he was going to. Basically, one of these is the historic application that's due to go to appeal. The appeal was for non-determination, and it's due before the inspectorate later this month. we'll take that first, and then we'll move on to an update on the current application. Well, they're both current applications, but the newer one.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So there are no updates to the appeal report back report. The purpose of that report, we're not seeking a decision here. We're just drawing to members' attention that we've had the development management DPD come in during the, obviously, since the application was determined, and we were just drawing members' attention to the fact that we will be seeking to make reference to it at the forthcoming hearing later in the month, and therefore insert that into the reasons that we will be discussing at the hearing.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? It is just for us to note. Members who've been on the committee for a while will remember the high level of public interest in this one, the amount of time that officers have spent on it. And I think we did 2 site visits, one at night and one during the day. But all we're being asked to do today is to note the report, which is about how the appeal will be defended. Can we agree to note it? Helps if somebody actually speaks rather than everybody just nods. Thank you very much. So, sticking with the same site, but the more recent application, and Nick is going to update us on 2 elements of this, and then we will need to make a decision.
Yeah, so this is, thank you, Chair. This is the current application where members have previously resolved to approve it, and this includes an agent of change agreement. This is the difference between this one and the appeal scheme. The appeal scheme does not have the agent of change agreement. So there's 2 parts to this report. The first part is about adding the agent of change agreement into the section 106. And the report therefore seeks an amendment to the resolution and tweaks the condition to allow for that. And this follows legal advice on how best to secure this agreement. This is the first time we've done one of these, so we're obviously learning as we go, but we clearly want to be as robust as we possibly can. So that's the first part. The second part of the report talks about amendments to the previously resolved to approve scheme in light of the fire regulations and building constraints. And it basically moves some massing around, and you can see from the various excerpts from plans in there that as a consequence the building gets slightly taller to one side, but we've obviously assessed the design and amenity implications of that, and we're satisfied that that they are acceptable, and obviously approval is recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. Is everybody clear on what the agent of change issue is? Do you want to just say a little on that? I can turn to James if you'd prefer, or I can have a go myself.
No, so the agent of change is obviously the principle is if you are coming into an area and you are the agent, so the residential is the agent of change, and the residential is therefore responsible for dealing with the implications of that in general. In this instance, a scope of works has been agreed with the Nightingale opposite to mitigate the noise at source, and this allows the development to have openable windows. And this includes an agreement, an actual legal agreement between the Nightingale and the developers to enable those works to happen. And you'll see that obviously there's conditions to talk to that, but we're now seeking to tie that into the 106 also. Does that cover it, Chair?
I think so. If people aren't happy, they can ask for even more detail. Anyone wish to ask a question or to make a comment? Councillor Stanford.
Just a general question, really. In the previous report, it refers to the affordable housing element.
and that there's viability report that shows that it's unviable to provide 35%, and therefore a commuted sum should be considered for that. Then refers to that commuted sum, referring less the sum for the Nightingale 600,000. So I'm just wondering, in terms of where the policy sits on sums that are commuted for the purpose of affordable housing, then being also used for agency change agreements for the Nightingale. What I'm getting at is that whilst I'm very much supportive of the Nightingale, should have a sum to take those mitigation measures on the noise. At the same time, that shouldn't come to detriment to affordable housing provision across the city and in that locality. I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, I'll get Nick to respond, but it should be noted that that is not one of the elements we're looking at today. Today, we're looking at two elements that have changed from what we've previously agreed.
Yes, yeah.
But if you want to explain that, that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So as it was previously presented, it was that even in the scenario where, because we have to allow flexibility that another development could come forward first and do those works, or the Nightingale could do those works off their own back anyway. So we had to build in flexibility that enabled a couple of scenarios. So that's the starting point. And as it was previously presented, officers were recommended refusal with a reduced scenario. If the works are done through another means, then it's just of benefit to affordable housing. So we took the position that, like I say, with the reduced provision, it was acceptable. Anything above that, obviously, with the additional 700,000, that's only of benefit. And that's what the scheme could quite rightly sustain and provide. I think in terms, the only relevance to the amended scheme is that the apartment mix slightly changes, and there is a line in the report back that talks to the point that the change is so minor overall in terms of the viability of the overall scheme that we didn't require the scheme to be wholly reassessed again at that point. Does that answer the question?
And we have already, I think, approved another scheme that, if built first, would invoke their responsibility as the first agent of change impacting on the Nightingale and the Fox.
Yes, yes. That's the one you saw just before Christmas.
Yeah.
But that's not approved yet. We're still working through that one.
Sorry, I knew I'd seen it.
Yeah, no. I think in terms of the discussion, I think the approach with the Nightingale is the same here, and I don't think that was disputed. But there's still some work to do on the Fox.
Okay, I haven't said anything out of turn there, have I?
No, I don't think so. No.
It's a publicly available application, but yeah, whoever goes first takes on that responsibility.
Yes, indeed.
And that's carefully worded. Yeah. Okay, so back to what is before us this morning. Any other questions or comments? No? If you're ready to vote then, can I see those in favour? That is everybody, so that is unanimously approved. Can we have Councillor Moore back in, just in case he's got any other urgent business? Thanks, Nick. Well, of course, if anybody else has got any other urgent business for today. No, nobody else is, so we are waiting for Councillor Moore to tell us whether you've got any other urgent business for today. Okay. So that takes us on to item 12, which is the normal authority to act between meetings. Can we agree that? And then we have our current pandemic situation authority, should we find ourselves in need of an alternative process. We're here today because we have to be here today, because our decisions have to be made in person. But this just covers us if we neither have the permission to meet virtually, nor are able to meet in person. So can we agree that? Thank you very much. That's it for today. And